sports sedans are on the grid. In fact, for this race, the Soleil Sports Sedan final, 8 laps of the short circuit, and this is the way they shape up on the grid. That's Bob Tyndall sitting on pole position. Alongside him on the front row, Jeff Barnes in car number 9. Second row, Des Wall and Laurie Attard, followed by Gary Scott and Mike Griffin. Then on the fourth row, Joe Said and Peter McLeod. Glenn Seaton and Tony Herbert on the fifth row. 1 minute till the flag drops. Gary McFadden and John Vernon share the sixth row of the grid. But there's a big field of 24 starters for this race.
It is a big field indeed, Gary, with Tyndall and Barnes on the front row. Then watch for the scrap between Gary Scott in the Armstrong Nissan 104 and, of course, Peter McLeod in the slick 50 Mazda, car number 50. 30 seconds before the start. The run down to Pepsi Corner should be spectacular. The first of the left-handers as they all try and squeeze their way through there, utilising the shorter course here at Oran Park this afternoon.
It's the biggest sports sedan entry they've had for a long time.
About 8 seconds away from the start. The line, and it's Barn Tyndall's, and 59 got an absolute flyer down the inside. Fadden as he comes down here on the inside looking for the race lead, but I think it'll be Barnes to lead. Here comes Tyndall storming back down on the inside, so Tyndall will take over second. There's the jostling going on. Mike Griffin going through in car number 41, and back behind him in car number 50 is Peter McLeod. There's Gary Scott looking for the run down on the outside. He'll cut back to the inside as they come up towards Yamaha Corner, but over the top, and it will be Barnes leading from Tyndall at this stage as they come down towards Castrol for the first time.
I think the stewards might be tapping their feet waiting for 59 McFadden to come back in. He must have jumped the start by a full 2.5 seconds.
Oh, there's Scott around sideways on the main straight. He's going to get out of harm's way. Could have been tapped in from behind. One going via the ditch, the dipper, and in all sorts of problem. But he's managed to park himself down there. And he's out of harm's way.
It'd
for
be
the
wise
rest
to stay there, wouldn't it?
I would think so. Barnes, meantime, will lead it back onto the short track. The winner of a sprint race here earlier this morning, and he's showing fine form. Jeff Barnes, car number 9, leads over Yamaha and now heading up to the flip-flop at Honda.
I mentioned, Mike, that this is the biggest field they've had for a long time in sports sedans here. In fact, they had to run 2 heats of about 30 cars each to decide the final field.
Let's have a look at what happened with Gary Scott. Scott, of course, coming out of the bend, getting a touch, I think, from behind here by maybe the car that even jumped to start. And Scott goes around sideways, making sure that he doesn't bring the front of the Armstrong Nissan back in front of the field, and he sits there on the edge of the course. And the one going off into the rough could be there for days.
Yes, and that was Joe Said giving the gentle nudge to Gary Scott.
I don't know what Joe said, but I've got a feeling what Gary Scott's going to say after the race is over. So the race continues with, of course, car number 9, Jeff Barnes leading, but not too far behind him is Bob Tyndall. And in fact, I think Tyndall is closing.
The lead car, with some of the engineering work done by K&A Engineering in South Australia, they helped to prepare and build a very spectacular sports sedan a few years ago that was driven by Tony Edmondson, the V8 powered Alfetta. It's interesting the difference between Amaroo and Oran Park, because here at Oran Park it's the big horsepower V8s, cars like this one here with Bob Tyndall, that seem to be able to put power to the ground and pull away from the cars like Gary Scott's Nissan and Peter McLeod's Mazda.
At Oran Park, people like Bob Tyndall just can't seem to get wound up long enough to get in the race at Amaroo. But here, where they've got some big open spaces and they can stretch out, he really does get in the thick of things. And the 2 leading cars are pulled right away from the rest of the opposition. In fact, McLeod's surprisingly far back in the field based on recent performances. Of course, Peter McLeod, that Mike Raymond spoke to just before the start of the race, having his last outing in the car and would have been looking for a good performance, but as I said, surprisingly, he's back at about 7th or 8th spot.
There's the field going through. We'll wait for Said. Now, here's Said coming through. Joe Said, but back behind him, Mike Griffin making a lunge, and Peter McLeod coming up very quickly in company with Gary Scott. So Scott's made up a lot of ground, but at the moment there's Said in car number 7, almost up on 2 wheels coming out of there. Be giving him a thrill.
The black flag did go out to McFadden as well in car 59, so he'll come into the Clark, of course, at the end of the next lap.
And they'll have a little chat. So there's Sed coming out, the backdrop. Wall-to-wall people here at Oran Park as we wind down to round 10 of the Touring Car Championship. Sed goes through. Mike Griffin will be the next one to gain ground on him as they come down back onto the loop, onto the short circuit. There's Sed, another car sitting in behind him. Then McLeod on the tail of Griffin. We'll deal with those shortly. 70 is Attard running in fourth, then Griffin, and then Peter McLeod being the next one through in car number 50.
Mike Griffin is another former Group C car, now in sports sedan guys. A car on which he spent an awful lot of money and is being rewarded with a pretty fair degree of competitiveness. Not so much here at Oran Park as we've observed, and it's here that the big thundering cars like Bob Tyndall's machine, with 2 laps remaining, powering up and dueling for the lead with Jeff Barnes. There's McLeod.
McLeod gives away a fair bit of weight to Griffin's car. Peter McLeod's Mazda RX-7 weighing in at about 950 odd kilograms. Griffin has got about 150 odd kilograms less than that in total weight. Lots more fiberglass on the car, and the car in fact stripped inside.
Yes, McLeod, I think, is racing still closer to the old Group C guys, isn't he?
Yes, the only thing that Peter's done is he's removed the headlights away from the front of the car. He's taken those out, the little flick-up headlights in the Mazda RX-7. And he's also put a fiberglass bonnet on the car. Here's Tyndall, car number 49, coming through the right-hander. And there's the leader, Jeff Barnes, car number 9, the Chevy Monza. Enormous horsepower, but having to thread his way through traffic here at the moment, that's a bit of a nightmare for him as he comes across the top at Yamaha.
Passing Nick Mittenway in 66. Peter Hopwood's been coaching young Nick Mittenway and helping him prepare this car. He's going to be a force one of these days in sports sedan racing.
Coming up to Castrol Corner, and as they come out of the bend, it will be Jeff Barnes coming down to take the checkered flag. So Barnes will be first across. Tyndall is going to salvage second out of this. And third place is going to go to Joe Sed in car number 7. But here's confirmation. Barnes the winner, car number 9. Second goes to Tyndall in 49, and third goes to Sed in 7.